Hi there, everybody. Thank you for being here. I am Elizabeth Corey. I am the founder of BeatingTrauma.com, and today we're going to talk about denial. To get started in that discussion, I want to talk a little bit about what denial is and why it exists in the first place. Because I think if we don't understand the basis for what truly is the controller's number one survival mechanism, it's then very hard to figure out what we can do about it. Because the controller has been using denial as a survival skill, as a defense mechanism, as a coping mechanism from the time we were very, very young, especially if we grow up in a traumatic home. So I want to stress that this is a very well practiced experience for us, right? Like, as a matter of fact, it's so well practiced that it feels almost second nature. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what it looks like in the mind, but I also want to be really clear that denial is not just a mind-based activity, okay? The denial is often coupled with dissociation. And dissociation is an extremely body-based experience. So we will have both a mind reaction and a body reaction at the same time, making denial stronger, right? Making it a lot harder to fight against because we are both dissociating and the mind is trying to tell us the story they want to tell us all at the same time. That's very hard to overcome, but it is not impossible. And I'm going to talk a little bit today about what we need to look for and what we can do about it and why it matters, right? Why it matters at all, because a lot of people would say, why do you want to take away the thing that helps me so much? So I want to talk about why it's a good idea to step out of it sometimes. But first, I want to say, why do we use it? Right? Like, why would we use denial and dissociation in the first place? And the most simple answer is that our reality we're living in is bringing up too much emotion. Okay? We are not, especially as children, we were not able to cope with that emotion. We didn't have the skills, we didn't have the brain development yet to do it. So we needed to find a way to cope with our reality. And what that became was pretending our reality wasn't really what it was, and that worked very well for us. I mean, this technique by the controller is extremely effective at getting us through an environment that we have no control over, that we cannot change in any way. So when this is used, it's because there's a lot of emotion in the system and it does not appear that there's anything we can really do about the reality. So in childhood, that was definitely true. In adulthood, maybe, maybe not. So that's why we want to play around with the idea of stepping out of the denial when we can. So what are some of the phrases that the controller likes to use to keep us in that denial? And I'll throw a few out. By the way, there are millions, okay? And they're very diverse, and we're probably using a lot of them over the course of our lives. But I'm going to just talk about a couple, and you guys feel free to comment if you have ones that are really strong in your system that you hear when you move into denial. So the first one is, it is what it is. And actually, that phrase coming from another person is actually what inspired the topic for today, because I just heard it. It is what it is, right? Another one is, it's not that, okay? Or it'll just work out. Then we can have the controller say things like, well, other people are just overreacting. Other people are exaggerating. They're getting really worked up, but that isn't necessary. Now, I want to be clear that this is one side of the controller's mentality. This is one side of their survival-based approach to things. It's not the only side. As a matter of fact, a lot of times in a society as a whole, you will have a group, and we can just, for purposes of today, make it simple and say like 50% of society will be in denial and 50% of society will be freaking out. Now, you might think, oh my gosh, that must be two different parts that are active. And in reality, it's not. It's the controller on extremes, right? This extreme versus this extreme. It's still the controller. Because yes, the controller will swing into a place where they are totally losing their mind. And this is another controller experience. And honestly, sometimes they will use things to feed that fear, like diving into rabbit holes on the internet, for example, in whatever way they may need to do that to kind of fuel that fear and keep you in the fear. But particularly, it's not about keeping you in the fear of the past. The controller doesn't want you to tie the fear in the body to flashbacks, to your past experiences. They want it to be about now. So they will take the fear that sits in the body and they will tell a story that's a present, current story. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't situations where the present story shouldn't cause fear in us. Okay. That's not what I'm saying. But we will take decades and decades and decades of fear and we will drive that current story with all of that fear-based energy, which, to be honest, has a tendency to make us just kind of paralyzed. I mean, we can't do much with it. It's just too much fear for us to work with. So we have these two sides, right? We have this side where the denial side, where we are creating a different reality. Right? We're making excuses for our reality. We are maybe even living in some kind of non-existent fairy tale in our head of what we would like our reality to be. Daydreaming is a huge part of our denial, especially as kids when things are really rough. We would often move into this place where we're just daydreaming away to cope with what we can't change. So that idea of daydreaming as a survival skill is very real. So when we're in that place, we've gone too much into denial. When we're in that freak out mode where we're literally paralyzed by fear, we've gone too much into the fear. Neither of those approaches are particularly helpful for us in coping, but it's all that we know to do. Right. So the goal here is not to end all of our coping mechanisms overnight. It's impossible. It's not going to happen. It just isn't something we can do. However, we can take little tiny steps back into the reality, right? Which oftentimes, by the way, means back into the body. There's going to be emotions around that, but there are ways to cope with those emotions that I'm going to talk a little bit about at the end. If you've never tried my approach to emotional expression, this would be a potential opportunity for you to do that. So, but first I'm going to say, I want to talk about why. Why would we want to step into reality? That feels like a bad idea on a lot of levels. I can't necessarily always argue with that. But again, we're talking about doing it in little teeny tiny bits, right? And those bits can be really small. Grounding into the body and really connecting with the emotions or connecting with the way we feel about the reality right now. You can do that for 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes at a time, and it is making a big difference. I want to be clear that that is helpful because, of course, the controller will tell you that it isn't helpful. They'll love to say that, but it very much is. Let's talk about this. First one, staying in our reality for moments at a time allows us to connect with that old traumatic fear and express from it, okay? And this will help us then be able to ground. So this is what I was talking about earlier with that flashback fear, right? Really intense fear. We can connect with it. When I say express from it, I'm talking about writing. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute too. This helps us to ground. When we are not completely consumed with the fear associated with the past, when we have an amount of fear that's somewhat reasonable and something we can work with, we can often figure out much better approaches to take in our lives. Second one is that staying in our reality for moments helps us so that like we can see what we can and can't control. about that reality. Because I'll be honest, when we're in a flashback and we don't really know we're in a flashback, we will often feel like there aren't any real changes we can make in our lives. Like there's nothing we can do. Everything is outside of our control. We don't have anything we can do to change our lives or take any kind of control over it. That stuff, no matter how convincing it may sound sometimes, is actually a flashback, right? It's saying this is not something you have any power over, which was, I should say, true. It was true when we were kids. That was very much accurate. Okay. Want to be clear about that, but it isn't necessarily accurate now. There may be things we don't have control over, don't get me wrong, but we often can't even see what we do have control over when we are in that flashback. The parts that are active in those moments don't even let us see it. We can't. We're too consumed with whatever those emotions are, which are often based in fear, but it may not just so. The third one is that staying in reality for moments will help us to take small actions, which could be good for us and could stem the impact of our reality. Because a lot of times when we're using denial, we're using it in a way that keeps us from truly understanding what we are dealing with. And when we do that, we often don't wake up to the reality until it is very, very bad, right? And we see this a lot in relationships. Like, let's say, intimate partner violence, domestic violence, things that are going on in our world, maybe at an abusive workplace or something like that. What happens is we stay in denial for so long, we make so many excuses for the people around us and their behavior, maybe even dissociating from it entirely, that we can't really see the actual reality until the actions get so intense and so bad and so over the top we can then see it. But at that point, there's often a lot of damage that has happened, right? Like the damage is big by the time we come out of it and we see it. And that's often what denial does to us, which is a problem because it can create quite like a life full of havoc for us, a life full of chaos, because we aren't seeing things early where we could actually start doing something about it before it becomes something that's really extreme. Sorry, my throat. So those things are the reasons why, even though I'll admit it, denial feels really good sometimes. It's like, oh, I could just pretend that everything is fine. It's kind of nice. It's almost like a little bit like a drug. And when you combine it with dissociation, that's really true. It's like it's like taking a hit of something or some addictive substance, a drug or alcohol, and being like, oh, okay, I can sit in this non-reality that says everything's fine. I can just sit there and be like, it's okay. It's okay. It's just all going to work out. It's fine. I'm good. And it does kind of calm the system down on a very surfacey level. Now, it doesn't do anything for the nervous system at all, but on a surfacey level, there's sort of this addictive quality where it's like taking a drug or taking a drink or doing something else that is addictive. That kind of rush you get from it is something that feels a whole lot better than sometimes really facing what is our reality at the moment. And I get it. I really do get it. There have been times where I've been like, there's the denial. I can breathe for a minute. I could sit with this and just feel like it's fine. It's fine. It is what it is. It's all fine. It's great. It's okay. It's going to work out. And I can just sort of sit in that. And it feels nice. I can even daydream about how it's going to work out, right? I can come up with a complete story in my head that takes me down this road for days, weeks, who the heck knows how long. Then you get the love seeker involved and it's about your knight in shining armor. And it can be a pretty extensive experience. That does does feel a lot better than facing our reality, right? So I encourage you to take moments to ground, to really bring yourself back into the body. Sometimes the controller will fool us into thinking that it is grounding to kind of pull ourselves out of the body. Meditations that encourage dissociation, I do not recommend. I always recommend meditations that encourage things like body scans, for example. Those can be very helpful for grounding. Also, just putting the hand on the top of the head, right? There's something very containing about that. I don't know why, but it really seems to work. Or my personal favorite that I use all day long whenever I remember to use it, which is really breathing into the feet, coming down into the feet. Now, of course, you don't have lungs in your feet. So how do you do that? You pay attention to the breath. You don't have to change it or force it or control it. Pay attention to the breath at the same time you're paying attention to your feet. What that does is it brings that energy center down as low as you can get it. Because to be honest, most of the time our energy center is somewhere up here. It's not even actually in the body. So we want to pull that down as far as we can, the feet being the lowest point. Don't get me wrong. You're not going to get your energy center all the way down to the feet, but you're going to just get it back into the body somewhere. That is extremely helpful. And when you're breathing and you're noticing your breath, it automatically lengthens and it can feel a little bit like you are breathing into your feet. I can't really describe it perfectly, like it's one of those things you have to experience, but it does kind of feel like that. So find something that grounds you. Now, finding things that presence you, also very helpful, but grounding things are just like really, really coming into the body are just so incredibly helpful for us. So I really do recommend that. And then letting yourself right from the fear that is showing up that says things are bad and there's nothing I can do about it. Because that's the flashback and that's going to pull you, right, into this place where there's complete disempowerment. So we want to write from that and we want to work with that so that we can come to an understanding of what our fear is telling us, where it's coming from, and what we can actually do, what we do have control over, what we can actually do about it. So let's see. Shabnam is saying how to find the balance between ungrounded fantasy that it will work out and the grounded hope that it may actually work out, given that we are healing now and hold more internal power up. Well, the second part of that is exactly what we want. So that's a great description of the most grounded way that we can be when it comes to our fear. And I think it's an extremely helpful experience to know that our healing is going to bring us somewhere positive and that we can continue to make changes in our lives that are good for us and that the healing is going to be a part of that. That's something I probably give myself a little pep talk on that one like every day because I need it. But that is actually what we are trying to do. So I think it's not so much about finding the balance between it as to be able to recognize that hope as grounded and also recognize the fantasy as ungrounded so that we can write from the fantasy, but hold space in our systems for that grounded hope. And the more that we write from the fantasy, the more the grounded hope can take hold. But I'll be honest, it's cyclical because some days I can reach it and I'm in it and it's beautiful and I get it and I know that it's gonna work out and I have this grounded sense about my own recovery journey. And then some days it's gone. It just poof, it is not available to me at all. But oh my gosh, it's such an amazing thing to hold on to on this journey. I'll be honest, hope's not easy for us. I mean, hope is hard because we have experienced so many hopeless things, right? Hopeless both in our current lives a lot of times and also hopeless things from childhood that it can, like, honestly, having hope already says so much about you as a person because it's really hard to do after trauma. It's very, very difficult. So if you have hope, honestly, if you're here listening to me right now, what drove you here was hope. right? Hope that there's a solution, hope that there's another way, hope that you're going to see positive things from connecting with yourself and doing emotional work. That it's hope that puts you on this journey, which is one of the reasons why I love it when people are on this journey, because it's very, very difficult to stay with this. The hopelessness is like a siren song, right? It's just sort of sucks us down into it and says, don't do anything, and don't, and I'll be honest, not doing anything is easy generally. So it's very easy to kind of get sucked into that hopelessness, and we are going to, right? We're human, we're going to. So Carol is saying, can you clarify how dissociation is a body thing when the controller lives in the mind? It is the one thing the controller has over the body. And basically, it's that it pulls you out of it. Right. So it's the only control the controller has in the body is to, well, okay, that's not entirely true. It can pull you out of it, and it can create enough tension in the body to block it, which is similar to pulling you out of it. It's just another version of that. But I wanted to distinguish between the two because they are both controller. But the controller does generally control the mind most of all. But the only way they can keep you in the mind that they control is by pulling you out of the body. So they do have the ability to dissociate you. But if you are consistently grounding, they can't do much about that. There's not, like, if you're, what I often say is, if your controller is controlling the mind and you cannot get back in charge of your mind, ground, because that is the one thing the controller cannot do much about. They need you to be dissociated so they can control you with the mind. If you're not, that's when they kind of lose control of, and that's when the adult self can really come in. And that's a gorgeous thing. Of course, that's what we want. So I often tell people, if you're feeling just way, way, way too controllerfied and you can't write and you can't do any emotional expression, there's one step left, and that's to ground. It's always the grounding pulls us away from the controller and into the body. Now, it also pulls us towards the emotion, which is exactly what the controller is trying to avoid. So we're going to feel something. But honestly, being in a constant state of denial, dissociation, and general defense doesn't feel, in my opinion, it doesn't feel better than the emotion. The controller will tell you it does, but if I'm totally numbed out and I can't feel anything, and it's like I'm just sort of a gaping hole walking around the universe, I don't like that feeling. And I don't think I ever liked that feeling, which is, of course, why I ended up doing this work, because I felt like I wasn't there, and that's not pleasant at all. So that's what I have for you today. Thank you so much for being here with me. This is a tough topic because we are really kind of dissecting the controller's approaches to things, and they don't like it. So if you stuck with me the whole time, that says a lot about you and where you are in your journey and what you can handle. So thank you for that, being here with me. And I hope that this was helpful for you and that you got something from it, just a little bit, especially in this day and age we're living in at the moment. So thank you guys so much, and I look forward to talking to you next Tuesday. I probably am going to have some gaps in my live streaming coming up because I'm making some really big changes in my life, but I will give you, and I'll try to give you a little bit of a heads up before those happen. But I mean, for now, just assume we are on schedule as normal. So thank you all, and I will talk to you next week.